Hi, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the course of English for Academic Communication with me, Maria Dewi Rosari from Jakarta International University. I am a lecturer of English department of this university. And for this HUF program in this 2022, I will deliver a course material under the course of English for Academic Communication. Without further ado, let's find out what we are going to learn in this course. And also for this week, which is week 1 or chapter 1, which is about course introduction and a guide to key terms and concepts. What are we going to learn? Let's find out. Let's start from the aim of this course. So this course is aimed for advanced learners of English because this course is about academic communication, academic language. So if this course is aimed to be in a class of beginner English, they will face many difficulties because there will be a lot of technical issues. There will be a lot of technical vocabularies and also structures and expressions too. So this course is more suitable for advanced learners of English. And then this course is also for those who want to construct their own strategies and how to tackle possible challenges in speaking in various academic settings. So this course is just not for, presenting this expression and that expression for you in a certain academic communication setting, but this course is also aimed to help you, to assist you in a way that you can construct your own strategies when you need to take a part in an academic communication setting. And also, you are expected to be able to tackle possible challenges when you are in need of speaking in academic language, academic communication. And also, this course is aimed for those who want to enrich their expression and vocabulary mastery to take part in spoken academic English situations. So it's not only expressions, but also vocabulary. Sometimes the vocabulary are just circling around this and that vocabulary. So that's why this course is over to you to provide you with more options, with more choices, with more vocabulary options so that the vocabulary can be various, can be rich. So that's the general goal of this course. For the detailed explanations and description about this course, you can revert to the syllabus that I already provided. And for this week, which is lecture 1, as written in the syllabus, it will be about course introduction. So let's get to know what this course is about, and also a guide to key terms and concepts. So before moving to the second lecture, we need to, you have the background knowledge about the key terms that we will use during this course. So when the terminologies or when the technical vocabularies appear in a certain discussion during this course, you won't be confused. So please do not skip this first lecture. And also the key concepts as well. So when you have completed this lecture 1, it is expected that in the next lectures up to the 12 lectures, you won't be confused with the, technical vocabularies or the key concepts that this course is using. And for this lecture 1, as you can see in the right part of the slide here, so there will be three main topics that are going to be covered in this lecture 1. The first one is the course introduction. Let's see why this course. I mean, what is behind this course? What is so important about this course? Although you can already see it in the syllabus, but there will be a further explanation about that. And then number two, the structure of the course. So you need to know this so that you know what to expect in every lecture, and you know what to expect after this section, and then what section will I have next, and in next section, what am I expected to do or accomplish. And then a brief note to learners, because you need to do a self-study, right? So there will be a certain guidelines on how to make most of it, and how to use these materials for your self-study. And then in the second topic, we will start the main material, which is about a guide, key terms of and concepts. So in here, there will be several subtopics that we are going to cover. The first one is about high-low context. So when we are in intercultural communications, we are going to find out what intercultural communication is later. So in such communication, there will be high-low context. There will be individualism. There will be collectivism. There will be masculinity versus femininity issues. There will be a need to tolerate ambiguity or uncertainty, and there will be a need to avoid such issue. And also there will be a discussion about silence, because in a communications, it is impossible to to keep talking all the time, right? There will be a time when we need to keep silent and then listen, or just although we are not listening, but we need to stay silent because of certain reasons, right? And the last one is effective factors. So simply speaking, there will be several concepts, several differences in intercultural communications that we need to master, so that the main goal of this course is accomplished. And the last one, that we facing challenges and exploring hidden assumption under section 3. So in intercultural communication, the academic communication, there will be some challenges, and this course wants you to be able to anticipate the challenges, and if the challenges do occur, what you need to do, and also exploring hidden assumptions. So the assumptions are hidden, and we need to know that. We need to spot that, right? Although it is hidden, we need to be aware of that occurrence, because if we don't know, or do not realize, or not aware of the assumptions that are hidden, that will interfere, the flow of our communications, especially in this academic setting. So those are the short description about what this course will be about, and also this first week or first lecture will be about. And without further ado, let's start at the very first subsection, which is about course introduction. Course introduction, why this course? I believe that when you select this course for your own learning, your own self-study, you must carry your own goals. You must have your own expectations, right? And let's find out further about this course in details. The first point that we need to discuss is speaking is deemed crucial for functioning in the target language environment, especially for those from countries in which English is used not as second language, but as foreign language. So, well, actually, it's my country. So in my country, English is treated as a foreign language, not second language. So the use of it is not that, often, like, for example, our neighboring country, the Philippines, like that. And this is the problem. Speaking is deemed crucial or, important to be able to take part in the target language environment. Especially for many international students, if you happen to be one, who speak or learning English as an additional language voice, they say that the sentiment that speaking is critical for functioning in the target language environment, as well as the most challenging aspect of using language in everyday life. Next one. Speaking in English is also deemed more difficult than writing. Of course, because in speaking, it's all about being spontaneous, right? Like giving response without delaying, without taking long time to give response, to give feedback, to give answers. While in writing, we can take our time, we can take like process to provide our responses, right? So that's why it is considered more difficult. And the fact is that many find speaking in English more difficult than writing, and find engaging in impromptu dialogues more difficult than presenting prepared monologues. Yeah, that's what's being spontaneous, right? Impromptu. Even many learners with high TOEFL scores feel that they lack academic speaking skills. So for those who are able to achieve high TOEFL score, or maybe other standardized tests, they still think that speaking, especially in academic setting, is difficult. Even many learners, even many learners with high tests of English as foreign language scores feel that they lack academic English speaking skills and regard improving their academic oral communication ability as highly important. These students, unfortunately, need to participate in academic conversations at advanced levels. They encounter daily many opportunities to speak English on topics about which they have sophisticated knowledge. They are required to share their expertise with others. For example, if they happen to be teaching assistants or research assistants, and they're usually highly motivated to improve their spoken English because they know that speaking fluency and confidence will impact their future career options, especially in this current era where workers from any countries work in any countries, right? You may see a lot of foreigners around you, especially if you live in a big cities, right? So English is inevitable. The importance of conversation in academic setting and the potential for miscommunication caused by cultural differences in conversation preferences are the main reasons behind this course. So this course is not only about providing you with a list of expressions, a list of vocabularies that you need to use in this certain academic setting, but it's also about discussing cultural differences, especially in this very first meeting, in the very first lecture. We will be discussing about what contribute to cultural differences and how they can affect our, our communications in intercultural setting. So in both its content and format, this course is intended to assist international students as they create their own opportunities to expand their linguistic and strategic repertoire in English conversations. So when using academic communication skills, is not only about the structure or grammar or vocabulary, but it's also about the knowledge and awareness of cultural differences. So that's about this course, what this course will be discussing about. And next one, let's find out the structure of the course. This course is intended to fill the needs of students who are becoming increasingly involved in their academic communities. These courses will be very useful, especially if you plan to go overseas to pursue your higher education. It means that you will be international students, right? And you will be involved in intercultural setting in which such skills in academic communication are very, very important. Some students participate in academic dialogues in various settings, sometimes as participants and other times as leaders. So This course is not only, discussing about how to, to be participants, for example, in a small group discussion, but you will also learn about how if I become the leader of the discussion, how if I become the leader of a meeting, an academic meeting, academic conference, what to do, what to say, like that. This course covers various topics and academic settings. So it's not only one or two settings, but I try to provide various settings. First, we are discussing a guide to key terms and concepts, and then engaging in interpersonal communication, and then participating in small group settings 1, and then participating in small group settings 2. So although they both are about small group settings, but they are in a different settings, different activities. And then giving departmental presentations, and then teaching in the classroom, stepping out, which are conference presentations, can also be research talks, teaching demonstrations, and interviews. So as you can see, the settings are various. Hopefully that this course can accommodate most of your needs in taking a part in an academic setting. And then the next one is a brief note to you as learners. Please pay attention to this one in how to make most out of this course. This course is to help learners to be more confident in conversational English for academic purposes. As mentioned previously, this course has been designed to help learners to be more confident in conversational English for academic purposes by enhancing your ability to recognize that the speaking situation, tasks, and partners inform one's speaking choices in particular speaking situations. In addition to that, this course intends to help learners to be conscious of any assumptions. Remember, the assumptions are hidden, that they and their speaking partners from other countries not share, and to expand the repertoire of communicative strategies to improve spoken English. So one big problem when we are in a communication with people from other countries are not merely about like their accent or their English or their choice of vocabularies, but also about the cultures that we don't share, the different cultures between our interlocutors and also us. Different cultures, different habits, different preference, and different results in communication and also communication expectations. So we need to be able to anticipate that, and then we can better participate in this communication. If you're using this book for self-study, I encourage you to discuss the questions contained in each unit with your peers and to apply the mechanics and strategies you have learned in your daily encounters in various academic settings. So if you happen to have peers that you can talk to, especially those peers are from other countries, that will be very beneficial for you in helping you master the material for this. So that's about the course introduction. I hope that the course introduction is clear to give you the big picture about what this course will be about and what you can expect from this course and what you will learn in this course. And for the next one, we are entering the second section, which is about the main material, which is getting started. So we start to learn the real material for this course from the next section, which is a guide to key terms and concepts, which is about unit introduction. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue to the next section, which is section 2, which is about the main agenda for this lecture 1, which is getting started, a guide to key terms and concepts. And let's start from the unit introduction. The first lecture introduces the key terms that you will need to understand as you embark on the activities presented in this book or in this course. So we will start the main material with several terminologies, several concepts that we need to understand. And most of the concepts are A versus B or C versus D. So there will be two things that are being compared. And further, when we already know what is A, what is B, let's say, what to do if we encounter A in our communication, and what to do if we encounter B and we are in the intercultural communication, like that. The purpose is not to comprehensively review commonly used terms and concepts in such fields. So it's not about, the terminology and concept like in applied linguistics or second language pedagogy or anthropology, but the main aim for this subsection is to increase your familiarity with the concept so that you can self-diagnose your speaking choices and challenges in academic settings. So when you know the terminologies and the concepts, you can reflect on your experience, on your abilities, on your preference, and then you can result in the conclusion about like the common challenges that you usually encounter in a communication. Is it just a matter of vocabulary, or is it just a matter of my grammar mastery, or is there something else beyond that that I have to be aware of so that I can better participate in academic communication setting? That's what's important. Remember this one, culturally shaped preferences. So preferences that are shaped by cultures, not by education, okay, can cause many types of miscommunications. And thus, throughout the course, you will be asked to return to the preferences introduced in this unit to explore the challenges that might arise in a range of academic situations. And then there will be many activities or many sections in which you are asked to analyze yourself. And through this self-analysis, you will need to evaluate what you need to consider, and then you need to prepare yourself to practice and to monitor your speaking when experimenting with the application activities suggested and when engaging in daily speaking encounters. So here, what is highlighted is also the ability to analyze ourselves. When we know how to analyze ourselves, we know how to evaluate ourselves, we know how to monitor, and then when we put the mastery into practice, we can do better, and then we can revise what needs to be revised so that in the next opportunities when we need to be involved in the similar situations, we can perform better. The aim is to promote transferability through a recursive cycle of learning that involves both socially interactive and self-reflective activities. Again, self-reflective activities. All right, so that's about the unit introduction. Please reread those points that I highlighted in this, I guess, two slides before you enter the key terms and concepts. All right. And now let's start the key terms and concepts. We are talking a lot about cultural values and cultural differences. By knowing that, we will be able to explore hidden assumptions, and we will be able to understand ourselves better. Like I said previously, when we encounter some issues or challenges when we are taking part in an academic communication setting, is it just a matter of vocabulary or grammar that we are lacking, or it's about cultural knowledge that we haven't mastered? Cultural values vary considerably. A culture is a shared system of beliefs, symbols, values, expectations, attitudes, and norms for behavior. So that's why different place has different culture. They have different shared system of beliefs. They have different symbols. They have different values, and that results in different expectations, especially what they expect when they are in a communication setting. And also they influences the behaviors of the speakers. Members of a culture may share similar assumptions about how people should think, behave, and communicate. So if you and your speaking partner are from the same area, meaning that you and your speaking partner have same cultures. So you share similar assumption, and that will be, that will create, a situation that is way easier for you to deal with, right? Because you two have similar expectation and assumptions about what this communication will be about. You guys will share similar understanding about how people should think in a communication, how you two should behave to each other in a communication, and how you two should carry out this communication or should do the communication. But that only happens if you and your speaking partner are from member of the same culture. Let's see what researchers here said. There are Oligin and Campbell and Oligin and Kumar. They researched in 1999. They explained cultural differences between one cultural group to another by presenting an iceberg metaphor to explain the complexity of any culture and how complex it is to see one culture with another. So I believe that you know what iceberg metaphor is as iceberg like that. So there is like visible layer and invisible layer. The visible layer is, that we can see from the air, but the invisible one is like under the water, right? So the visible layer is the explicit layer of the iceberg, and that represents facts, the fact about the culture. But the invisible layer, which is under the water, it is the implicit layer, and that represent unconscious rules or hidden assumptions. So that's why we call it hidden assumptions, because it's invisible. We cannot really see it visually, but it's there, right? Iceberg, the invisible layer, we cannot really see it, but it's there. It's under the water. So when speaking with someone from another culture, you might encode a messages based on your own assumptions. So when speaking a certain topic, say A, one person from another culture, convey the message using their own assumption, but then you translate it, or we translate it with our own assumption based on our own culture and belief. So that's the issue. That's the issue that we need to be aware of and to understand and to anticipate. And this reside in the implicit layer of your own culture, right? The way we encode the message is something that is invisible to our speaking partner. Whereas your listener may decode your messages according to assumptions that reside in the implicit layer of his or her culture, right? Although it's hidden, although it's implicit, it's there, and we need to be aware of that. If you are international students who come from educational environment that differ from the place where you are studying, for example, Indonesian students who study in the United States of America, like Eastern versus Western culture, right? You may encounter differences in academic traditions. For example, many students have very different expectations about how learners are supposed to behave, and also about how teachers should behave. Maybe students from a certain country or a country has a, like a chill vibe to academic expectation or academic tasks. And the students and then flies to another country whose culture in academic setting is very different, in which the students in that academic institution is, cannot chill. Like they're very serious. Even when the class reaches late evening, they're still serious. While the student, because they're used to, like chill, vibe in learning, and they cannot cope. And that really happens. Where two sets of expectations intersect, linguistic and paralinguistic cues can have vastly different meanings. These differences may create varied responses when people use them in cross-cultural contexts, and opportunities for misunderstandings and miscommunication may arise. So that's why it is highlighted in the very first meeting, because if we don't highlight this, if we are not aware of this, although we know a lot of expressions and vocabulary and structures to be used in various academic settings for communications, it won't be enough, because we need to understand this intercultural knowledge so that we can, anticipate and minimize the occurrence of misunderstandings and miscommunications. And there will be several factors. Well, actually, this first lecture only covers some of them. And of course, there are more than that. But I chose the ones that, the minimum knowledge that we have to know, we have to master. And the following factors will help you better understand the range of predictable, particular academic situations covered in this course. Now let's see the factor one by one. There will be 5 or 6 factors that we will cover. The first one is high-low context. Have you ever heard of what makes a culture is in high context and culture in a low context? What makes them high and low, and what is the meaning of high and low here? It's not that high and low, though. It is in a different meaning. Let's find out. First, let me start by asking you this question. What is intercultural communication? What do you think? What is a communication that is intercultural? You may, you can understand them, try to predict the definitions from, the prefix, like it's inter, and then the next part is cultural. So intercultural. What is the meaning of something started with inter, like international? So what do you think? What is intercultural communication? Well, it is a communication that occurs in encounters between people from different cultural backgrounds. So such communication happens if it involves at least 2 people from different backgrounds, different cultural backgrounds. Then the next question will be, how can we understand intercultural communication, right? So we know that our speaking partner is from different country, different culture, and then what to do and how I should, carry out this conversation so that I won't create misunderstanding or disturbance to my speaking partner. Well, the answer is this one. It is by considering the cultural preferences for certain communication patterns that various researchers have examined in their efforts to link cultural norms to communication and linguistic patterns. My question is, what kind of issues or challenges that you have experienced when you were in intercultural communication? It can be a communication with, any citizen of any country. It's not necessarily with the one, from a different continent. Even if you're Asian, say it's Southeast Asia, like me from Indonesia. So when you are Indonesian, are involved in an intercultural communication with, let's say, Thai people, right? Have you ever experienced issues or misunderstandings or miscommunications or any type of issues, you may recall your memories first. And it is very important to acknowledge that issue and use that issue for our discussion in this lecture one. The next one, let's find out what is high and low context. It's from Hall 1976 that distinguishes between low context and high context cultures to describe cultural differences in communication patterns. So, well, actually, there are a lot of factors that we can use to describe cultural differences, but let's start from differences that are divided by high context and low context. But first, what is context? Is it just the same context when we do reading? It's like understanding a vocabulary from the context like that, right? But is this context here the same with that? Well, it is related to whether what is being communicated is inherent in the setting. Let's see what high context is. So it is called happening in high context if what is being communicated is already understood by the speakers involved. While low context, what is being communicated requires the speakers to communicate most of the information overtly through the spoken exchange of messages. Let's see further explanation about this. The next one, I want you to answer these two questions. What do you think can differentiate individuals from high context culture and low context culture? And can you mention some examples of citizens from countries with high context culture and the ones from countries with low context culture? You may refer to the previous slides to see the differences between high context culture and low context culture. And then you can go to the slide 12 to find out the questions and try to answer that. Well, you may, type it or write it on a piece of paper or simply take notes in your phone like that. So whatever will do. So take your time, pause this video, and stay in slide 12 to finish answering these questions. And whenever you're ready, let's go to slide 13 to find out the answers. So let's see what makes high context culture is different from low context culture, and it's from the same researcher, which is Hall in 1976. Individuals from low context cultures, so the ones in the left box is for low context, and the ones in the right box is for high context culture. Individuals from low context cultures are like those from North America, German-speaking countries, and Scandinavian countries. But try to imagine people from those countries first. They tend to verbally explicit and do not rely on store of shared assumptions and implicit information that are present in the context of an event. These individuals may prefer to use a direct and linear discourse in communication and to provide contextual information such as facts, figures, statistics, and other pieces of background information to their listeners. So have you ever listened to people from those countries speaking or having a communication in English, maybe from YouTube videos or any videos online? Do you think that those characteristics suitable or fit with what you see in the videos? If you want to prove that, you can find the videos about those people from those countries having communications and try to compare with this. Individuals from high context cultures are like those from Japan, China, Arab, and Latin American countries. What makes them different? Most information is either contained in the physical context of an event or internalized in their interlocutors. Different, right? Explicit and then implicit. When communicating, individuals rely more on shared knowledge and assumptions, while individuals from low context, no. High context cultural speakers tend to be more verbally implicit. They often rely more on nonverbal cues and use more indirect, subtle, and circular communication patterns. So, circular. Let me provide you with one example for this situation. An example that typifies the situations is the case of, let's say there is one student who was pursuing a doctoral degree in medical sciences. These students had worked at a major hospital in Canada for over 5 years and said that he needed to improve his pronunciation and vocabulary because of the communication challenges that he had with his colleagues. After analyzing one of his dialogical exchanges, he had an aha moment when he realized that his perceived inability to communicate with his colleagues had very little, if anything at all, to do with a lack of vocabulary or competence in using precise words and terms in his communication or his non-native accent. What happened then? Instead, the difficulties resulted from his preference for inductive reasoning, which is one of the key characteristics of high context cultures, and for an indirect and circular communication style. From his colleague's perspective, his discretions or the need to establish all his reasons or evidence before stating his request or main point made him take too long to get to the point, which led to communication breakdowns. You see the difference? He, in turn, was often perplexed about his North American colleagues' directness and explicitness, which he interpreted as insulting and unfriendly at times. Have you ever experienced a situation, or at least seen such a situation? So, it is important to guard against assuming that people from a specific contextual cultural orientation tend to communicate in a certain way at all times, however. Within a particular culture, the degree of explicitness or implicitness, the opposite, or how much information needs to be explicitly transmitted or coded in a message may vary, depending on such factors as context, interlocutors, audience, purpose, and many other factors. For example, the interactions of two people from a low context culture who have come to know each other very well, such as two very good friends or two people who specialize in a particular field, may take the form of high context communication. So, although this slide provides you with characteristics that differentiate high context culture to the low context one, but it doesn't mean like it must be like that. Like the example that I just said, it still depends on the person, the interlocutors, the context, the purpose, and many other factors. So we cannot just stick to these characteristics and ignore any other factors that may influence people from high context culture to communicate in low context culture way, right? Okay, so that's about high low context cultures. The next one, we are entering individualism and collectivism. All right, now let's move to the next factor, which is about individualism and collectivism. Previously, we compare high context culture versus low context culture, and now about individualism and collectivism. Well, I think that the concept of these two things are not something that unfamiliar, right? I think it's quite familiar for us. Let's see what they are about. These dimensions relates to the relationship between the individual and the collectivity that prevails in a given society. So some group of society prefer to be individual, while some others prefer to be collective. Let's see how they are different. Let's start from collectivist cultures. So the members of this cultural group are interdependent within their in-groups. Their in-groups means family, nation, tribe, and many others. And the members of this cultural group give priority to the goals of their in-groups. So the main goal, the top priority is what their in-groups have, not their own. People shape their behavior primarily on the basis of in-group norms. So the role of in-group is very, very influential in here. Now let's compare it to individualist cultures. People tend to see themselves as autonomous and independent from their in-groups. They give priority to their personal goals over their in-group's goals. So you see the difference, right? The top priority for the people who belong to individualist cultures are their own, not their in-groups. They behave primarily on the basis of their own attitudes rather than on the norms of their in-groups. So as you see here, the role of in-groups is very different between collectivist cultures and individualist cultures. Knowing that difference, what do you think about your own culture? Is your culture more of collectivist culture or individualist culture, and why? So it's not only selecting one, but please analyze further why you call it collectivist or why you call it individualist. If you need time to answer that, you may pause this video and stay in the slide, and you may continue it again if you have finished answering that. Whenever you're ready, let's continue to the next slide, which is slide 15. The differences between the two cultural orientations may include these characteristics. In collectivists, the consciousness of the members is we, you and me, we. And the identity is collective. That's why it's called collectivist, right? And they try to maintain group harmony because they want to stay, in groups in a collective manner. And group decisions matter. How about individualist cultures? It's the opposite. The consciousness of the members is I, and I, not we, but I. And the identity is autonomy, not collective, because it always refers to their own, our own. And then independence, because you stay or stand on your own feet. And it relies a lot on individual initiative. Key differences between individualist and collectivist societies that may manifest in school settings include the following. So we have seen the differences, right, between individualism and then collectivism, and how they manifest in the setting of academic. Let's see. So in cultures with an individualist orientation, identity is based on the individual person, whereas for the collectivist, it is group identity. Let's see further explanation. Now let's see from the context of completing a task. So people from different group, individualist group or collective group, have different approaches to the way they complete a task. Let's find out. In collectivist cultures, for those of the collectivist orientation, relationship building tends to precede task completion. So in a group of collectivist people, before they come to the completion of the task assigned, the very first step is building the relationship among the members, right? That comes before task completion. Meanwhile, in individualist cultures, the importance of accomplishing the task tends to take precedence over relationship building in group work situation. So in individualist group or cultures, their main priority is to complete the task, right? And building the relationship can come later. But in collectivist, it's the relationship first, then the task completion. In individual cultures, generally, people should strive to maintain harmony and avoid conflict. So, but what makes them different? So you see the we consciousness, the relationship between you and me, right? So we consciousness, but individualist, no. It's completing the task first, and relationship, it can, can be for later stuff. How about when participating in class discussions? So when later you meet a speaking partner from a country whose culture is different in terms of individualism and collectivism, please anticipate this thing. Collectivist cultures. Students with collectivist orientation tend to be more reluctant to speak up in class or in large groups. Well, it's actually very Indonesian. We are very reluctant to speak up or to speak a lot in groups, especially if the forum is very big. We tend to stay silent like that. Individual initiatives are discouraged in collectivist societies because it is for individualist culture or group, right? Meanwhile, for individualist cultures, it would be like this. In individualist cultures, speaking one's mind or expressing one's opinion is valued. But for us, like Indonesians, we're so collectivist. It takes so much bravery to raise our hand in a big forum and then to express our opinion, express our mind, express our ideas, right? Because it's considered something that is not comfortable for most of people. But it doesn't mean that all Indonesians are like that, but most of Indonesian. So the collectivist culture is still dominant, although as the time goes by, some people tend to switch to individualist culture instead of collectivist. And that's why I ask you, how about you? How about your country? How about the people around you? Is your country more of collectivist or individualist? This one's still about individualist cultures. Such initiatives are often encouraged and viewed favorably in individualist societies, but in collectivist, no, don't talk too much like that, more or less like that. Still about when participating in class discussions for collectivist cultures. The examples are Central and South America, Taiwan, South Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, and China. The people from those countries tend to frown on behaviors that reflect individualism and instead stress the value of collective behaviors. So in those countries, like Indonesia, so when there is one person who speaks a lot or expresses their opinion a lot in a forum or in a big community like that, we'll stare at that people, right? But it is not what's happening in individualist culture. The examples are North America, Australia, Great Britain, Netherlands, and New Zealand. But for this cultural group, they tend to accept, even encourage, or even reward individualism. So they reward and appreciate those who speak up, raise the hand a lot, and express opinions and ideas in a forum like that. So that's what happened in individualists, not like in collectivists. Well, it was that this section is not meant to, to show which one is bad, which one is better. No, it's just to highlight that people have different preferences based on their cultures, and by knowing that, we can be more aware when we need to be involved in a, in the cultural communication. So back to the main goal of this course, it's not for discouraging a certain group of culture. Okay, moving on is about masculinity and femininity. This dimension deals with what implications the biological differences between the sexes should have for their respective social roles. So different genders result in a different expectations, different behavior in communications, especially in intercultural communication. Let's see how they are different. Let's start from masculine culture. The labels it labels those who strive for maximal distinction between what women and men are expected to do as masculine culture. And then the examples of the country that revert to this culture a lot are Japan, Austria, Venezuela, and Mexico. So in this cultural group, there is a strong distinction between what men are expected to do and what women are expected to do. So men should do this and women should do this. So the differences of the roles are very, very obvious and clear. This is not what happening in feminine culture. Those labeled as feminine cultures permit more overlapping social roles for the two genders. So the differences are not made a very rigid or very strong like in masculine culture. The examples of a country who refer to this culture a lot or more are Sweden, Norway, the Netherlands, and Denmark. The same question. So which one is your culture in your country or in your area? Is it masculine or is it feminine, and why? How can you group your culture or group your country to masculine or to feminine? If you are able to provide a certain, examples or examples of the people's behavior, that will be better. Another characteristic that differentiate those two. Members of highly masculine cultures tend to believe that men should be assertive and that women should be nurturing. So, like what I said, men should be this or do this, and women should do this or be this, like that. And it's very assertive. It's not negotiable. And it results in this: gender roles are clearly differentiated and gender inequality is accepted as the norm. Meanwhile, in feminine culture, gender roles are less rigid and equality between the genders is the norm. So equality between genders is what becomes the priority. So it is possible for men, for example, to be nurturing and for women to be assertive. So it's not always men that can be assertive, but women can be like that too, right? And the other way around. That's what in feminine culture. So this characteristic can help you more in deciding whether your area has more masculine culture or feminine culture. And later, when you encounter people from different countries or different areas with different masculinity and femininity cultures with yours, you won't be confused or surprised, but you know what to expect and you know what to see and you know how to anticipate. Gender differences and values have been extensively examined and discussed by Deborah Tannen in 1996. Her work has shown that each gender has its own way of thinking, feeling, speaking, and behaving. Men and women can be very different in their patterns of communications, yes. They have different way to communicate. So it is important not to use this information to stereotype gender differences. So it's just like a tendency, so the differences can be just tendency, but it's not like always like that, meaning that say a man is always assertive, so every man that I will encounter in my communication activity will always be assertive, and woman will always be nurturing. No, don't stereotype gender like that using this knowledge of this material. Don't use these informations to create that stereotype. Instead, use the information to increase our awareness of whether or how gender differences may be a factor in styles of both verbal and nonverbal communication in order to avoid miscommunication and to work together more effectively. So use this information, the differences, the characteristics as a way to build our awareness so that we can anticipate, again, we can anticipate the problems, we can anticipate the challenges, we can find out hidden assumptions so that our participations in a communication will be more effective, will be better, will be smoother. That's about masculinity and femininity. Let's move on to the next one, which is about tolerance for ambiguity or uncertainty avoidance. Before we start this material, let me ask you one question. Have you ever experienced confusing situations in an intercultural communication? So when things go ambiguous, or when it becomes uncertain and it makes you not comfortable, so can you tolerate that? Or do you prefer to avoid that? That's what we will discuss in this section. Uncertainty avoidance as a cultural characteristic deals with how people from different cultures handle unexpected and potentially confusing situations. So confusing situations is very likely to happen in intercultural communications because two people have different backgrounds, different behavior, different norms, right? So like we discussed previously, we say something from the perspective of our culture, but it is understood by our speaking partner in their own culture or norms, right? So the confusion is very likely to be there. Cultures differ in the extent to which people prefer and can tolerate ambiguity, and therefore individuals tend to select different mediational means for coping with situations that they perceive as unstructured, unclear, or unpredictable. So how about you? How do you usually cope with such situation? Do you avoid it? Or do you have a certain coping mechanism or coping strategy, right? Using this factor, we can differentiate two groups. They are low uncertainty avoidance and high uncertainty avoidance. Let's see. From low uncertainty avoidance, the examples for those are people from Denmark, Jamaica, Ireland, the United States, and Canada. These cultures therefore have a high tolerance for uncertainty and ambiguity. So if something go uncertain or unexpected, they have high tolerance. And they have a small probability to avoid that. In comparison, high uncertainty avoidance happened to those who are from Greece, Guatemala, Portugal, and Uruguay. These cultures therefore prefer to ensure certainty through demanding rules and regulations that constrain human behaviors. So when they meet uncertainty or something ambiguous, they try to avoid it. It's different from the previous cultural group. Differences in the preferred level of uncertainty avoidance can lead to problems in communication. So that's why it is highlighted in here so that we know when uncertainty happens, unexpected thing happen in our communications, we know what to do. or at least we know that we should expect such situation or such issue in our communication. The example for that is like this. For example, a student with high uncertainty avoidance, so like to avoid uncertain situation, who feels most comfortable with clear structures, rules, and parameters, and less comfortable with ambiguity and unpredictability, tends to prefer explicit instruction and knowing the correct answers. Such a student, therefore, might become frustrated by a direction to choose your own topic, or by the autonomous learning approach preferred by a professor who exhibits a low uncertainty avoidance style of communicating. So let's say one day you want to be a research a teaching assistant to a students who have high uncertainty avoidance. So you need to, prepare certainty, right? For example, you are teaching reading or you are teaching writing. When you ask your students to select their own writing topic or reading topic, there is a high possibility that they don't like it. They want something certain, not ambiguous, like that. So this is what it means by knowing this material so that we can better anticipate this issue. And that's about the tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty avoidance. The next one, we are discussing about the next factor, which is the last factor about cultural differences before we come to the last one about the affective factors. And this last factor is about silence. The fifth factor that we need to understand in intercultural communication is silence. What is the meaning of silence in here, and how does it play a role in intercultural communication? Let's find out. The role of silence in communication has received growing attention in recent years. Researchers recognize that silence is not simply an absence of speech, but instead has forms. So it's not just like staying silent without, saying or speaking any words, but it has forms and even it has functions. Let's find out the forms first. The example showing a silence has forms is like some individuals remain silent while others engage in discussion. Yeah, because it's impossible for us to always talk, always speak in a communication, right? We need to stay silent for a while to let our speaking partners to speak in turn. But silence also has functions. For example, cognitive for processing language, discursive for marking discourse boundaries, social for politeness strategies, for example, and effective for managing emotions. So silence is not, something bad in communication. Even it has a lot of functions, and the functions mentioned here are just some of them. There are still many other functions or purposes of using silence in a communication. And both forms and functions constitute an important part of communication. So it's needed in a communication. And the perceived amount of silence can be a source of stereotyping. And although we know that silence has functions, has forms, has purposes in a communication, but some people still make stereotype about this, as said by Nakane in the research in 2005 and 2007. Many have argued that culture-specific uses of silence convey information about cultural norms and attitudes about talking versus silence. So, behind the use of silence is cultural aspect. It's still about culture that we need to understand here. Silence may involve inter-turn between interlocutors and intra-turn within the same speaker pauses. Non-participation in conversation or lack of speech in interactive situations And the value of silence in communication varies greatly from one culture to the next. So, how people from a certain cultural group see silence in the communications can be very different from the ones from other cultural groups. So, this is what we will discuss further in in this section, so that later when we meet people from other countries who uses a lot of silence, we we are not creating bad assumptions about them, but instead we know what to do, we know what to anticipate. Stereotyping and misunderstanding may occur when the characteristics use of silence by members of one speech community is interpreted according to the norms and rules accepted by members of another speech community. So this is why it is important to be aware of this, so that when we encounter speakers from other cultural groups and they have different behaviors from us, from ours, they use this, for example, silence in a different way, in a different amount, in a different purpose. We're not judging them as a bad speaker or any competent speaker, but instead we are more aware and able to understand that it's just a different in the cultures and behaviors. In terms of attitudes towards silence, these researchers, as you can see in the slide, suggest that Western culture, people from Western culture prefer talk to silence. In Eastern culture, more positive values may be attached to silence. So as you can see in here, how Western and Eastern culture are very different in viewing silence in a communication, right? Silence in class or in academic seminar may be misinterpreted as lack of interest, an unwillingness to communicate, shyness, or lack of oral proficiency or communication skills. So this is where miscommunication and misinterpretation occurs in intercultural communication, especially if the academic seminar involves people from various countries. Let me provide you with one example for this. One example of how the factor of silence comes into play in a communication is the case of a PhD candidate who, during his thesis defense, took excessively long pauses to compose his thoughts and responses after each question, without giving any eye contact or any verbal or non-verbal signals to indicate that he was thinking. His communication style, which might have been interpreted as deliberate, careful thinking on an important occasion, instead was perceived as a lack of knowledge. It was so unfortunate, which ultimately led to an unsuccessful thesis defense. So this is where misinterpretations of silence happens in communication. Therefore, one must be cautious, however, about stereotypes surrounding silence and talk, and about the comparisons often made between Western and non-Western cultures. It is important to be aware of possible situational, contextual, individual, international, or interregional variations rather than oversimplistically attributing silence to a particular ethnic or national background. So we know that Western culture or countries who have Western culture are, they prefer talk to silence, and the Eastern culture have different, the opposite view. But it is very important that in addition to knowing the differences, we are not creating stereotypes, because there are still many other factors that may make those people from Western culture, for example, prefer silence to talk, like the opposite. Like in here, be aware of possible situational, contextual, individual, and many variations. There are still many other variations that may create differences. So do not create stereotype, although we have discussed this part. Okay, so that's about the fifth factor that we need to be aware of, which is about silence. And the last one is actually a different factor. Previously, it's about factors related to cultures, but this one is not related to cultures. Let's find out. It's about affective factors. What is it? Like I said, it is additional factor, but it's not related to culture. In addition to cultural differences, there is one more factor that plays a role in communication, and it is affective factor. This is a factor that one must not neglect. So we must not neglect the factors related to cultures, but also about this, we cannot neglect it either. Affective factors include many things: willingness to communicate, inhibition, impulsivity, and extroversion. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 factors inside affective factors. We will discuss that one by one. So I indicate each factor in affective factors in different color to make it easier to differentiate one from another. The first one, let's discuss willingness to communicate, which is defined as an underlying continuum representing the predisposition toward or away from communicating, given the choice. So people have choice to communicate or not. If it is not so, it is unwilling to communicate. If it is, is looking forward to the communication, so the person has a more willingness to communicate. Such a predisposition may be target language related or may have its roots in one's first language communication patterns. So what makes some people are willing to communicate while some others are not are, a lot of factors. It can be related to the target language. For example, non-native English speakers talk in English as the target language, and that can make the speaker not really willing to communicate. And another factor is the first language of the speakers, because the first language and the target language have different patterns of communication, and that can interfere someone's willingness to communicate. Furthermore, having a high level of communicative ability does not necessarily correspond to a high willingness to communicate. So having high willingness to communicate is not equal to high communicative ability, and the other way around. People who have, a great communicative ability can still have a low willingness to communicate, and the other way around. Rather, one's willingness to communicate may be related to various factors, such as group climate, self-confidence, personalities, and motivations. So although someone is very good at communicative ability, he still doesn't have, a high willingness to communicate if he's not motivated, or because his personality is not just like that. Like his personality is not like liking communication a lot, right? Something to remember about learning additional language is that it's always about making mistakes and errors. It is impossible for us to learn a new language, additional language, without making errors and mistakes. But unfortunately, some people perceive mistakes and errors as threats to their ego. And it results to this one: apprehension or fear of showing self-doubt leads to the construction of mechanism for protective self-defense and can inhibit one's willingness to participate or to take risk in speaking publicly. So although someone is very good at communication, but if he is, is not comfortable with making mistakes or making errors in communication in the target language, he may not talk a lot. And this inhibition leads to the factor of being impulsive or intuitive versus reflective or systematic. Let's see. Individuals with an impulsive or intuitive style tend to be more willing to venture a guess, whereas reflective or systematic individuals tend to weigh all consideration about an issue before venturing an answer, because they take so much time to reflect, right? Because they are not impulsive. And extroversion is another potentially important factor in communication. Extroversion versus introversion. Which one are you? Are you extroversion or introversion? An extrovert needs to receive ego enhancements from others, as opposed to deriving that affirmation within oneself as in introversion. So extroversion needs enhancement from outside of him or herself, while introversion is from within. That's what makes them different. And this factor is relevant in face-to-face interactions. As established in this unit, cross-cultural norms of verbal and nonverbal interaction may differ widely. And it is important to be aware that what may appear to be introversion in one culture may mean something else. For example, one seems to be introversion or introvert, but in another culture, it's seen as politeness, or it's seen as respect for others, like that, or it can be perceived as something else. In speaking situations across various academic contexts, one needs to be sensitive to an individual's attitudes about speaking out in a public setting and to cultural norms, as well as to individual preferences. So that's about the affective factors, in addition to the factors that are related to cultural differences. And this is also marks the end of the material of the lecture 1. But before we close lecture 1, let me deliver a final note on this material. The cultural dimensions and individual factors covered in this unit are by no means comprehensive, and one should not overlook the complexity, situatedness, and interrelatedness of those factors or dimensions in communication. So, what to do? We need to enhance our awareness. We need to understand and also achieve mastery through further reading. So the factors, the issues, right, that may occur, that may be present in intercultural communication in academic setting. So use that knowledge to have further reading on that topics. So we have a better awareness, we have better knowledge about that, because the discussion of those factors, again, are not comprehensive, and there are still many other maybe sub-factors that may make them varied. Also, learn from generalization about other cultures, and do not use them to stereotype or oversimplify your ideas about another personal culture. We have discussed a lot about, for example, Western culture is like this and Eastern culture is like that. Although we know that it is not the aim of this course to make the students make stereotype about a certain culture or oversimplify the ideas about a certain culture. Instead, use the generalizations to help you understand and appreciate the diverse qualities of the people you meet. So when we meet a person from another country that has different norm, different behavior, different expectation, different way of communications, we can appreciate the diversity. We can appreciate the difference and welcome and embrace them. And we know how to respect the diversity. Remember that cultural norms may not apply to the behaviors of any particular individual. Ladies and gentlemen, we are all shaped by many, many, many factors can be our ethnic backgrounds, families, education, personalities, and are more complicated than any particular cultural norms would suggest. Check our interpretations when we feel uncertain and keep questioning our assumptions about the right way to communicate. That can be the closing statement, right? The closing statement for this lecture one. And the last one, the very last one about this lecture one is that the third section, and it's about facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions. So we have covered a lot of things about cultural differences in academic communication, right? That can actually be applied to non-academic communication. Now let's see some challenges and hidden assumptions that may occur. And I want you to take your time to reflect on those questions and to answer those questions, and please keep the note of those answers, because we will go back to that answer again in the next lecture. So here it is: facing challenges and exploring hidden assumptions. So this is aimed to explore what you have experienced or what probably will you experience. Explore these questions on your own if you're using this book for self-study. If you're using it in a classroom, share your thoughts about these questions with a speaking partner and be prepared to share your discussions with the class. There are only two questions, right? They are: one, how do you identify yourself in terms of your communication preferences as presented in this unit? So you can see or reflect whether you are, for example, whether you are individualism or collectivism. Are you into high context culture or low context culture? Are you more of masculinity or femininity? Do you have high tolerance for uncertainty in a communication? How do you view your silence in the communications? And how about the affective factors that may play a role in the communication that you will have one day? And number two, how do you think that these factors might influence your own actions as a student, research assistant, or teaching assistant, as well as your expectations of your instructors or supervising professors? If you're learning this material together with your friends, you two or you and your friends may have different answers for this, and that's completely okay, as long as you are not answering these questions by making stereotype or over simplifying certain cultures. That's not a big deal, right? So please pause this video, stay on slide 32 to answer these questions. Please take notes and do not throw away the notes when you're finished, because we are using that answer again in the next lectures. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, this marks the end of the material of the lecture one. This lecture one uses the main reference from Huang LS in her book published in 2010. This is the information about the book. An additional reference, as you can see, the citations are taken from this one. So you can find the article or the books listed in here if you want to read more about the sentences that I quoted in this lecture one. Well, I think that's all for this lecture one about course introduction and also a guide to key terms and concepts. Thank you so much for joining this course of English for Academic Communication. I'll see you in the second lecture, right? In the second lecture with different topic, with different discussion. I'm Maria Dewi Rosari from Jakarta International University. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next lesson.